At 56, Pauley Perrette has finally broken her silence, and what she revealed confirms everything fans feared for years. From childhood trauma to Hollywood betrayal, her journey wasn't just a career, it was survival. Now, the woman behind Abby Sciuto is telling the truth, and it changes everything. Her past was never quiet. The truth behind Pauley's childhood. Before she was Abby Sciuto, the caffeinated, goth-loving forensic genius, Pauley Perrette was just a kid trying to find somewhere to belong. She didn't grow up with red carpets or fancy studios. Instead, she grew up on the move, 14 different states before she was even an adult. Her father worked for the railroad, and that meant constant relocation, leaving Pauley feeling like a stranger everywhere she went. Worse still, home wasn't a place of comfort. Raised in a strict religious household, Pauley's early world was full of rules. TV was discouraged. Movies were off limits. But even then, her imagination ran wild. "I wasn't dreaming about being famous," she later said. "I was obsessed with crime, with justice, with why people did the things they did." While other kids read fairy tales, Pauley was buried in criminal case files. True crime stories weren't entertainment. They were her education. She pored over forensic psychology and studied serial killer patterns. Her dream? The FBI. Acting wasn't even on the radar. She followed that dream hard. Pauley studied criminal science and psychology in college and had her sights set on a future in law enforcement. But then, everything changed. While living in Atlanta, she was the victim of a violent mugging, a moment that would shift the course of her life forever. It wasn't just a physical attack. It shook her to the core. Suddenly, she wasn't just someone who studied victims, she became one. "I wanted to understand people who hurt others," she later shared. "But now, I wanted to protect the ones they targeted." That was the turning point, the line between who she was and who she would become. It wouldn't be the last time trauma changed her life, or that pain would push her towards something bigger. Which brings us to Los Angeles, and the moment Pauley hit rock bottom. From homeless to Hollywood, a life on the edge. She arrived in Los Angeles with exactly $71 in her pocket, a single backpack, and nowhere to go. No apartment, no friends, no family safety net, just a city full of strangers and a dream she hadn't even figured out yet. Most people would have packed up and turned around, but Pauley Perrette didn't know how to quit. She was stubborn in a way only desperation can teach. She took any job she could find, bartending, catering gigs, handing out flyers on sidewalks, walking other people's dogs just to make a few bucks for gas. Some nights, she crashed in her beat-up car, parked under streetlights just bright enough to keep the fear away. Other times, she found a couch or a floor to sleep on, always temporary, always uncertain. There were days she skipped meals, days she gave the last of her tips to feed a dog before feeding herself. But through it all, she kept going. "I had nothing but this weird drive," she later said. "Not to be rich, just to survive. That's what kept me moving." It was during those unstable months that she found someone who'd change her life forever. Not a casting agent, not a director, but a shaking, abandoned pit bull on the edge of a sidewalk. Pauley named her Cece. They had both been discarded, overlooked, misunderstood, and in each other, they found safety. That dog became her anchor, her shadow, her family. Pauley took Cece everywhere, job interviews, errands, nights sleeping under the stars. Years later, Cece would become a heartbreaking symbol of the very conflict that would tear Pauley away from her most famous role. But back then, she was just hope wrapped in fur. Ironically, acting wasn't even in Pauley's plan. She'd studied criminal science and psychology. She still wanted to work with the FBI, maybe profile serial killers, maybe dig deep into forensic work. But one random day, while sitting in a coffee shop, she overheard two people talking about a casting call nearby. It was one of those moments that changes your life, and you don't even know it's happening until it's already over. Pauley walked over. "They asked if I was an actress?" she recalled later with a laugh. "I said no. They said, 'You are now.'" From there, it snowballed. She booked small parts, blink and you miss it roles on shows like Frasier, Murder One, and a brief appearance in Almost Famous. They weren't glamorous. They didn't make her rich, but they got her in the room. And when Pauley was in the room, people noticed. She had this rare energy, a strange mix of toughness and softness. You couldn't tell if she'd punch you or patch you up, and that kind of presence was magnetic on screen. Casting directors didn't always know where to put her, but they knew they wanted her. By the time NCIS came calling in 2003, Pauley wasn't chasing fame anymore. She wasn't dreaming of billboards or premieres. She was chasing something even rarer in this town: stability, a steady job, a place to belong, a future that didn't involve sleeping in cars or taking calls from collection agencies. She never imagined that this one audition would lead to 15 years, 350 episodes, and a character that would become a symbol of outsider empowerment for an entire generation. But the road to Abby Sciuto wasn't paved in glitter. And what she found on that set would change everything: her career, her identity, and her very sense of safety. For better, and eventually, for much, much worse. Becoming Abby Sciuto, the role that changed everything. When Pauley Perrette walked into the NCIS audition in 2003, she didn't look like anyone's idea of a forensic scientist, at least not on paper. She wore sneakers, a blonde ponytail, and a plain shirt. No goth makeup, no black lipstick, no pigtails. But show creator Don Belisario took one look at her and said, "That's Abby." It wasn't just a casting decision, it was fate. Abby Sciuto wasn't just a character. She was Pauley's soul in costume. Quick-witted, deeply empathetic, quirky, but brilliant. Pauley didn't have to act like Abby. She was Abby. The caffeine obsession? Real. The knowledge of forensics? Also real. She had actually studied ballistics and lab protocols before Hollywood was even in the picture. And just like that, a television icon was born. For the next 15 years, millions tuned in to watch the goth lab tech with a heart of gold solve crimes and speak truth to power. Her red calf pow cup, Bert the farting hippo, and those knee-high boots became symbols of comfort for a generation of fans. But more than the look, it was Abby's warmth and Pauley's authenticity that made her unforgettable. She became the heart of NCIS, the emotional center, the only actor to appear in every episode from 2003 until her departure in 2018. Nobody else on the cast matched that. "I didn't feel like I was playing her," Pauley once said. "It felt like she was saving me." But behind the scenes, something darker was building. The pressure of staying in character for so long, the responsibility of being a role model, and the cracks that were beginning to form within the cast. The job was changing her life, but not always for the better. Still, she kept showing up, even when her personal pain was mounting, even when the role began to feel like a mask. It wouldn't be long before the world would learn that behind Pauley's smile was a silent struggle, and the place that had made her a star was also starting to break her. Behind the smile, the hidden toll of 15 years on NCIS. On screen, Pauley was magnetic. Off screen, she was falling apart. What fans didn't know during her 15-year run on NCIS was just how much she was enduring to keep going. She suffered from severe claustrophobia, yet she filmed every morgue scene without a double. There were times she had to be coaxed into the set, heart racing, chest tightening, just to get through a take. Every morgue scene was a panic attack I had to perform through, she admitted years later. But she never complained. Instead, she gave back, quietly, constantly. She launched a secret webcomic under the name P, giving all ad revenue to animal shelters. She rejected offers from magazines, including $2 million offers from Playboy, because I didn't want to be known for that. I wanted to be known for who I really was. She didn't chase fame. She chased purpose. Pauley even paid for the funeral of a young cancer patient, Christina Flores, whom she'd met through Make-A-Wish. The girl's family couldn't afford a proper burial. Pauley never told anyone she covered it. It only came out years later. But as her fame grew, so did her silence. Because in 2015, something terrifying happened. She was attacked near her home, beaten by a homeless man while walking alone. She later tweeted, "I almost died tonight." The story made headlines, but what it left out was the emotional toll. Pauley was already fragile. That attack broke something. She started pulling back, from friends, from events, from parts of the job she once loved. And then came the breaking point, a dog bite that would rip the cast apart and expose the fracture no one wanted to talk about. Because on the NCIS set, fear was about to replace trust, and Pauley would never be the same. The dog bite that shattered everything. By 2016, NCIS was still one of the most watched shows on television, but behind the scenes, everything was about to fall apart. It started with a dog, a rescue pit bull, brought to set by series star Mark Harmon. One day during production, the dog attacked a crew member, requiring 15 stitches and halting filming for nearly 2 hours. It wasn't a playful nip. It was serious and bloody. Pauley Perrette was horrified. She begged CBS to ban the dog from set permanently. Her concern wasn't just for herself, it was for the safety of everyone on set. But when the dog returned, she felt betrayed. "They didn't protect us. That's what hurt the most," she later told a friend off the record. What followed was something fans never saw coming. Pauley and Mark, once close colleagues, stopped filming together completely. A new clause was written into her contract stating she would never be required to share a scene with him again. From that point on, every shot was carefully edited. Body doubles, green screens, separate filming days. It became routine. But the cost was massive, not just financially, but emotionally. The show's production schedule was turned upside down. Tension replaced camaraderie. Directors had to make last-minute changes just to keep Pauley and Mark separated. Crew members whispered about it, but no one dared speak publicly. What made it worse was the silence. Mark never addressed the attack, not even to Pauley. And CBS? They issued no official statement, choosing to quietly smooth things over instead. But Pauley was done being silent. She was having nightmares, panic attacks. Her once beloved set now felt dangerous, even hostile. "I used to feel safe here. Now I count the seconds until I can leave," she reportedly told a friend during her final season. Even her longtime co-stars noticed the change. Pauley wasn't herself anymore. The sparkle, that quirky, caffeinated joy fans loved, was gone. Something had broken. Her last episode aired in 2018, and though her farewell scene was emotional, she and Mark weren't even in the same building when it was filmed. It was a quiet ending to a loud legacy, and the final crack before everything exploded into public view. Because soon after, Pauley would stop playing nice. She would stop hiding. And for the first time, she'd name names. I am terrified of him. The public fallout. A year after leaving NCIS, Pauley Perrette dropped a bombshell on Twitter, one that made headlines across the world. I am terrified of Harmon and of what he's done. That one sentence changed everything. It wasn't just gossip anymore. It was accusation, fear, a cry for help. In the tweets that followed, Pauley hinted at a pattern, not just the dog attack, but multiple physical assaults and a long trail of HR complaints that she claimed had been ignored for years. Fans were stunned. CBS stayed mostly silent. And Mark Harmon? He never responded. But people behind the scenes started talking. It came out that Pauley had filed at least 3 formal complaints during her time on the show. She'd reportedly hired a private investigator to track safety violations and document what was happening on set. The result? A confidential settlement. Sources inside CBS leaked that Pauley was paid between $5 and $9 million, echoing the earlier scandal involving Eliza Dushku on Bull. But unlike Dushku, Pauley wouldn't go quietly. She didn't break her NDA, but her tweets left no doubt something had gone horribly wrong. There is a machine keeping me silent, she wrote, but I refuse to be controlled anymore. Fans rallied behind her. Petitions to fire Harmon circulated online. The story dominated tabloids and entertainment sites for weeks. But Hollywood, as always, moved on. And Pauley? She was done. She refused to appear in any spin-offs. No cameos, no interviews, nothing. The last time she appeared as Abby, she delivered her final lines in a set built to mimic the old lab, far away from the people who once called her family. The heartbreak wasn't just in her voice, it was in her silence. Because when someone like Pauley says, "I'm scared," you listen. And when she disappears, you ask why. CBS paid to make it go away, but Pauley refused to stay silent. When Pauley Perrette walked away from NCIS, people assumed it was just burnout. A long career, a graceful exit. But the real story? It was buried under NDAs, lawyers, and network fear. In the months after her explosive tweets, rumors started swirling about money, manipulation, and silence. And then, the truth began leaking out. CBS had reportedly paid Pauley between $5 and $9 million to settle what insiders called a hostile work environment claim. The agreement was meant to keep things quiet. No lawsuits, no interviews, no public statements. But Pauley didn't care about money. She cared about truth. I've been silenced, manipulated, gaslit, but not anymore, she wrote in a post that would go viral overnight. It was vague enough not to break legal terms, but loud enough to say everything. The comparison to the Eliza Dushku settlement wasn't just speculation, it was eerily similar. Both women were outspoken, both claimed to be targeted, and both were paid off in private, while the public was left in the dark. But Pauley wouldn't fade quietly. Every tweet, every subtle message, every refusal to return spoke volumes. She knew what they had done, and she wanted the world to feel it. CBS, for their part, said nothing. Not a denial, not an apology, just silence. Meanwhile, NCIS moved on. New cast members, new seasons. But something had changed. The heart of the show, The one character who felt truly irreplaceable was gone, and no matter how they tried, they couldn't fill the space she left behind. Pauley never did a reunion, never showed up in spin-offs. She didn't even return for fan tributes. "I would never go back," she confirmed when asked years later. "Not for $1 million. Not for anything." Behind that line was something deeper: pain, anger, betrayal. Her final episode, emotional as it was, had been carefully edited. She and Mark Harmon didn't share a single scene. Their characters never said goodbye face to face. That was the choice, and the wound, left unhealed. But Pauley didn't need a dramatic exit. She already had her ending. And in the quiet that followed, she started to realize something. She wasn't mourning the show. She was mourning who she had become inside of it. Hollywood had given her everything. Then it tried to take her voice away. She refused to let that happen. And when she finally stepped away for good, she did it not with a scandal, but with freedom. I'm free. The collapse and retirement. No one expected. In 2020, fans were stunned when Pauley Perrette appeared in a lighthearted CBS sitcom called Broke, a complete shift from her crime-solving days. It was her first role since NCIS, and people hoped it might mark her comeback. But almost immediately, things felt off. The show struggled. Ratings dropped by over 50% in just a few weeks. Critics were harsh. The writing felt thin. The tone didn't fit Pauley's sharp, soulful energy. And behind her wide smile, something seemed distant. Within months, Broke was canceled. Pauley barely reacted publicly until she tweeted just 2 words that said it all. I'm free. It wasn't bitterness, it was relief. She didn't want to act anymore. She had already turned down roles on Law and Order, SVU, and The Good Doctor, the kinds of parts she once dreamed of. But something had shifted in her. It's not about work, it's about peace, she said in a rare interview. I was chasing something for so long, I forgot to ask if it was still worth it. She gave up 25 years in the industry, walked away from red carpets, from Emmy campaigns, from everything that came with being Abby Sciuto. Hollywood didn't push her out, it drained her dry, and she stepped away before it could take more. She began living quietly, spending her days with her rescue dogs, supporting animal shelters, donating to causes like the Innocence Project. No reality shows, no memoir, just quiet, deliberate living. The woman who once read criminal profiles for fun now spent her mornings gardening and walking CC through Los Angeles neighborhoods no paparazzi bothered to follow. It shocked everyone. A character as beloved as Abby, gone, just like that. But for Pauley, it wasn't loss. It was healing. The thing about trauma is, it doesn't always explode. Sometimes it creeps. And Pauley had carried it quietly for too long. She didn't need applause anymore. She needed freedom. And even though Hollywood may have wanted more of her, she'd already given enough. A brush with death. The stroke that changed everything. On the morning of September 2nd, 2021, Pauley Perrette woke up and couldn't feel half her body. She tried to speak. Nothing came out. Panic rose. Her limbs weren't responding. Her voice was gone. Alone in her home, paralyzed and confused, she thought, this is it. But someone was watching her. Her rescue dog, Rosie. Sensing something was wrong, Rosie pawed at her face, licked her hand, barked until help came. That one instinctive act likely saved Pauley's life. Doctors later confirmed it was a massive ischemic stroke. For 36 hours, she couldn't speak. Her memory blurred in and out. Doctors warned she might not survive the day. "I nearly died, and nobody knew," she later said. It wasn't a tabloid headline. It didn't make front pages. She shared it quietly, a year later, in a short video posted online. No makeup, no filters, just a woman who had stared death in the face and lived to tell it. But survival came at a cost. The months that followed were brutal. Physical therapy, speech retraining, days when she couldn't remember words, nights filled with fear. What if it happened again? What if, next time, Rosie wasn't there? For Pauley, the stroke wasn't just a medical emergency. It was a reckoning. She pulled back from everything, and even social media. Friends said she started visiting Benedictine monasteries, places of silence and stillness. She stopped giving interviews, stopped reading about NCIS, stopped chasing answers. What she found instead was peace. The stroke didn't make her bitter. It made her grateful. For breath, for quiet mornings, for dogs who loved without condition, for the simple gift of being alive. And even in recovery, she still gave. She sent anonymous donations to stroke recovery centers, made surprise visits to animal rescue clinics, left tips so large they made servers cry. It was the same Pauley, just slower, softer, changed. She had faced the machine of Hollywood, faced betrayal, violence, fear. And then she faced death. But somehow, she was still here. Scarred, maybe, but whole in a way she hadn't been before. And quietly, as 2022 came and went, she began preparing for the final act of her life. Not for the cameras, not for the press, but for the causes that had always mattered more. What she left behind. The final act of Pauley Perrette. In 2023, news leaked that Pauley Perrette's will had been finalized and filed, and it wasn't what anyone expected. No trust funds, no gifts to family, no payouts to former colleagues or Hollywood foundations. Every dollar, estimated at over $22 million, was going to no-kill animal shelters and the Innocence Project, a nonprofit dedicated to freeing the wrongfully convicted. "My money won't go to people who just showed up when it was convenient," she once said to a close friend. "It'll go to the ones who never had a voice. Just like I didn't." She requested no funeral, no public tribute, just two wishes. The first, that her ashes be split in half, one half scattered near a dog park where she had spent years walking her rescues, the other half buried under a tree at the shelter where she found Cece. The second, a letter to be shared publicly after her death. A short, handwritten note that simply read, "I left the screen because it stopped feeling safe. I left fame because it stopped feeling real. I gave everything I had to a role that saved me, until it didn't. I'm not gone. I'm just somewhere quieter now. And I'm finally free." In the end, Pauley Perrette didn't disappear. She evolved. She taught people that it's okay to walk away, even from the thing you once loved most. That strength isn't about staying silent. It's about speaking up when the cost is everything. Her legacy wasn't just 350 episodes of television. It was the lives she touched off camera, the animals she saved, the survivors she inspired, the fans she made feel seen, understood, and loved. In black lipstick and pigtails. At 56, Pauley Perrette confirmed what we all suspected. She didn't leave because she was done acting. She left because it nearly destroyed her. And in walking away, she became unforgettable. She walked away from fame, fortune, and one of TV's most beloved roles. Not because she lost her passion, but because it almost cost her life. At 56, Pauley Perrette's truth isn't just a revelation, it's a reckoning. And now that she's free, she's never looking back.